my name is Zoe. I'm in 10th grade. I'm a sophomore, and I'm planning to leave high school this year.
My name is Josh Finley. I'm 18. I took the CHSP, it's California High School Proficiency Exam. I'm out of high school now, so I'm in my own life.
So I'm Jeff Speckles. I teach English at Washington High School in Fremont.
How long have you been teaching?
This is the end of my 6th year at Washington, and I taught for a year before that in San Francisco.
Okay, I'm Mr. Sean. I'm an American Studies and U.S. History teacher at Washington High School.
So I'm Lance Miller. I'm the assistant principal at Washington High School. I've been here for 7 years, and my basic job is working with students.
I'm planning to take the CHSP in mid-June, and the CHSP is the California High School Proficiency Exam. And it's essentially like a GED, but you can take it at 16 and 17, whereas you have to be 18 to take the GED.
How long have you planned on taking the test?
I actually only planned on doing it from, I think, halfway through 8th grade. My brother had done it before me, but I hadn't really considered it an option until then.
What's the main reason that you decided to leave high school early?
Main reason I left high school early was I couldn't really pay attention to classes. My English classes, math classes, I wasn't getting good grades and D's, F's, but computer classes, auto shop, getting A's, B's in. So I decided, just combine the two. So I'll do all my classes online on the computer. So I was more interested in it. Auto shop, I'm still taking auto shop at Washington here. I'm also working in automotive, so it all works out now.
I just don't do very well in this school setting. I feel like this might be kind of I feel like in high school I'm not really going to get what I need, or if I am, it's something I could get in college, and I would kind of just rather get there early and start working on like what I'm going to do from there, because I don't feel like the couple years in high school is not really necessary. I feel like I could be doing more advanced things, and I don't mean that in terms of like math and science or anything like that, but the kinds of things that I'm interested in, I'm not really going to get a great education in high school, and I don't think that being here is really going to help me get to those goals.
School-wise, probably smaller classes, and I know because of budget, because it probably wouldn't work out that well, but smaller classes, more teachers, they can pay attention to a smaller number of kids at one time. It's sort of things like that.
Did you find yourself needing more specific?
Sort of. I mean, I needed probably a little bit more attention than what I was getting before. But now, what I'm doing on the computer works out better. So there is no teacher. So I just kind of, I do everything on my own time on one pace.
Well, that matters.
I don't know, the thing is, high school is created for a certain kind of person, and I think that the system, I guess it works for a majority of people, because the majority of people go on to be normal, successful human beings. But I feel like they want you to do all these things that just really aren't necessary. The role of a teacher in high school. If it's a teacher who is teaching the subject that you're passionate about, and you want to continue on with your career in that subject, I think it's a lot more important for them to like actually try to help you learn as much as you possibly can and mentor you.
You said like you could do English. You're not a dumb person, so would you say like you need like more just so you feel like more involved and more
Yeah,
like
I'd like to have like teachers to have more involvement in like students or
just like more engaged?
yeah, it's more engagement with the students.
Your subject?
I think that ultimately the goal of I once was asked. I told you this, Kyle. Last year I was once told by another teacher that my job as a U.S. history teacher was to teach our kids to love America, and I often thought about what that meant. And ultimately, I think there's only one way to teach anybody how to love their country, and that is to become vigilant and to become somebody who is educated and knowledgeable and asks questions and doesn't just blindly accept what is told to them from any person or source, whether it's me or someone else, a university president or the president of the United States. You should be asking questions constantly, striving for more understanding and learning, and refuse ignorance. That's the only way you can love your country.
And ideally, I think a teacher is more like a coach.
Like in terms of motivation?
Sort of. And because the connections that you have to coaches are usually a little bit less formal. You know them more as people. And I think that that's important because you're more willing to do things for people that you know and feel care about you on some level than you are for somebody who's ordering you to do something that you have no personal connection to at all. So ideally, a teacher is really good at making those personal connections, because if they're not, then you're not going to be able to inspire people to try to do something that sometimes they're not going to want to do, because, to be honest, I mean, school is one of those things where you can't always want to do it every day, right? And you do it because you care about something, right? And maybe that's you care that the teacher cares that you do it, you know what I mean? And you don't want to disappoint them, and that can be an important tool in being a good teacher, I think. It's really to motivate students using a personal connection. So
Specific to their subject, getting the kids to it, and kind of trying to find any way of making that happen. So it's kind of a weird analogy, but think about it like a soldier. You know, you've got your task, and you may have learned one way, but unless you accomplish that task, it's not going to do you any good. And so the same thing applies to teaching. I think that we come through our post-college, like our credentialing program, learning a way or several ways or things like that. We get all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed thinking, oh man, this is going to work the minute I try it, and it doesn't. And so our jobs, we already know this stuff. We already have an idea of how to teach this stuff. Our jobs when we're here is to find ways to make you guys understand it.
But ultimately, if we don't change teaching, we don't go in and look at teachers and help teachers grow and become better teachers, just changing the standards isn't going to change anything. Even if the standards are asking us to be more rigorous. Because I can read, students need to be doing this higher level of thinking or higher level of doing anything. Reading, writing, mathematics. But if me as the teacher if I don't have the capacity to really figure out how to teach to do that, I can definitely just put things in front of kids, but that might not mean that they're learning. And we need to help teachers become better facilitators of that.
Some small fixes are just the creation of different programs, looking at the types of classes that we teach. Sometimes kids aren't challenged enough. I actually know a couple of kids who've taken the California High School exit or the proficiency exam.
And we've interviewed a couple.
Yeah, because they don't feel challenged enough. And so making sure that there's a broader array of classes, which is always tough in times of a budget cut. Making sure that for kids who kind of like wander through the first 2 years and go like, oh, school doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how it's going to connect to me. Things like the CCA, the Multimedia Academy, the Creative Arts Academy, and CAA, sorry. Programs that have relevance, connections with ROP and internships is always helpful. Just like teaching style, there isn't one thing that's going to take all of those kids who either go to Robertson or transfer out to Vista or sign themselves out when they're 18 or any of those things. There's not one thing that's going to change everyone. So it's trying to figure out a lot of things that kids can connect with.
Gotcha. So in these statistics, it said something ridiculous, like each year, over 1 million students drop out of high school in the U.S. Quarter freshmen don't end up graduating, which is a staggering number. I mean, obviously there are a ton of things that go into that, but like, what would you say is the main thing you could do, or main 2 or 3 things or whatever, that would help that?
That is a staggering number. That's nationally.
Yes. Quarter.
I mean, students need to be supported all the way through. That's one thing. And sometimes I think that we let students fly free a little more than they need, especially early on in their high school careers, because your freshman year and your sophomore year is so important. Like, if you've done a certain number of things wrong, or not well enough leading up to your freshman and sophomore years, then I don't know, you kind of get lost, right? So there need to be transition programs for certain students. There needs to be an honest assessment of that number.
There's a couple things there in terms of the dropout rate. And it's a big question.
Yeah.
And I'm not pretending like I have the silver bullet. There is no silver bullet.
Yeah, I don't
But what there is looking at our current system and recognizing that we do not teach in a way that reflects the students' needs. Our schools are ingrained cultures that look very much like they did in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. And our teachers and our administrators and our communities don't want the schools to change very much because that's what they went to. And everyone went to school and everybody's got an opinion and it's just your experience. But the reality is that for many of our students, our schools are not supportive places that reflect their culture, that reflect their priorities, that value their families. And the first step to addressing that issue of dropout rates is to make schools that value the families and the students that attend those schools. And that requires us to listen to our students. And it requires us to take a critical look at our curriculum and think, hey, where am I not really reflecting the people I'm teaching?
I think that number is hard to see in schools, in part because we experience students leaving school, but often we associate that with them moving to a new place, and we don't see the dropout, you know, because we're concerned with the other 35 people that are in our classroom, and that's a large number of people to be involved with on a regular basis. The system itself is too big almost to really address each individual as a person. And I think if people felt like a connection to their teachers, where their teachers cared about them, then I don't know, they might feel more connected to being here in the first place. I think that that's important too. Education as a system is slow. It's not reactionary. Reactionary is the wrong word. It doesn't react fast enough. Like, the world is way faster than education is. And so here we are, 2012, reading exactly the same books and literature classes that my mother read when she went to high school in 1956. And that doesn't make sense to me. A lot has changed since 1956. we're reading the same books I read too. The last change since 1992, right? And the fact that we're focused on the same literature in an English class, I think, is problematic, but it's indicative of a larger problem, which is that we get stuck inside of the system, the way the system works, and change comes too slow.
Is Shakespeare really worth reading if it doesn't reflect the kids and their lives and what they feel? I understand, yeah, it's literature, and literature is important, and we need to have literature, but we also need kids to want to learn to read and want to be excited about reading. And if Shakespeare's not going to do it, should we force it? Or do we start figuring out what works best for the students in front of us to get them to become what they can be?
Probably like most people experienced me here, I was pretty open, pretty laid back. I was definitely approachable, and I felt like the only way like kids were really going to learn was for me to kind of make contact, get to know them as students, and for them to get to know me as a teacher and not. So I didn't do a lot of lecturing. We did a lot of lots and lots of projects. There's a lot of discussion based. I learned that really, really well at the 6th grade level, so that when I transitioned into high school and kids could, focus a little bit more and things like that, and got into more, they understood the references a lot more. It became a lot easier to have those discussions, and a lot of the things that I was teaching in 6th and 7th grade, I was constantly saying, like, when you get older, this will apply to you. Whereas when I was teaching it to 9th and 10th graders, especially sophomores, things were starting to apply to them, so it was a lot more relaxed.
I think that I ultimately feel that my style of teaching is to confront young people with the reality of our history and the things of our past and ask them what they think, and to allow them to develop the ability to think critically about the world around them by analyzing the things in the past that have led to where we are today.
Do you think that, in general, they do an adequate job of that in high school, letting students think, teaching them to think critically?
I think that there are always incredibly passionate teachers at high schools that do that very well. I think that, unfortunately, we've become attuned to, teachers ultimately have become put into a peg where there's a lot on their plate. They have to, the schools are asked to solve all the social problems of our society. Schools become the panacea for them. And we can't do everything. And then on top of that, when they start telling us that the way we teach or what we're teaching is wrong, and over the years, it's not just like one thing, over years of telling teachers how to fix their teaching in the hopes of getting to a place where we do critical thinking all the time, we've actually taken critical thinking incredibly away from teachers. And they feel the only way to cover everything they're supposed to cover in such a long amount of time is to do a whole lot of memorization and regurgitation, which ultimately isn't learning. And I think we're really being confronted with that right now, because in the day and age when everybody has Wikipedia in their pocket, why do you ever need to memorize anything to regurgitate it? You can look it up. What you need to be able to do is think critically about the information that you have access to. And that ultimately is where we're at right now, is we're in this place where we're not adequately asking those questions and figuring out how to think critically in the classroom. And a lot of teachers just require their kids to memorize, regurgitate for the moment, and that's that. I would venture to guess if you asked a lot of students what they feel they've really learned in school, they would have a hard time asking that question.
Answering that question?
Yeah. They'd have a hard time answering that question.
There you go. Speaking of that, I don't think you can see it through the camera, but you have that big screen that says institutionalized racism right behind you.
Yeah.
And there's definitely inequities, like you talked about, in graduation rates and things like that with minorities. What do you think? I mean, obviously, poverty is part of the problem, and there's a whole host of larger issues that go into that. But how do you, as a teacher or as a dean, as you're going to be, how do you begin to address that problem?
Well, if you notice the definition there on institutionalized racism says, the big thing is when these systems remain unconscious of issues of race. And ultimately, we all move through our systems without really knowing or looking or thinking deeply about how our social identities affect the system around us, and how the system affects us based on our identities. And I think where you start is by asking those difficult questions and having those difficult conversations. And when you see something that is perplexing and is not fair, calling it out, naming it, and having that discussion on a regular basis. I think what I've been doing as a teacher is regularly every year having my civil rights unit address this issue and having students have to confront what they think about it. And as a beginning, and you remember this, people are in different places. They might agree and they might disagree that this even exists, but they at least are starting to think about it. And the more we have that conversation, the more that comes up with students, with parents, and with our teachers in our community, the more we're going to be effective at addressing that. But I love these kids. I've said this all the time. You don't become a teacher because you love math. You become a teacher because you love these kids and you want them to become good people. And I've always wanted my kids to be good people. I want them to move forward into the world and do good things, and I want them to treat each other right, and I want them to vote for leaders that they know will change the injustice in our society, and I want them to fight injustice themselves. And I want them to do that because I love who they are, and they are more than capable of doing it.
All I have. Thank you.
Cool.